Hello again, Pastor Jeff, coming back to visit with you, still sheltering in, rejoicing in the Lord, spending time, hopefully praying, spending time getting to know Jesus maybe a little more intimately during these times. Certainly, they are chaotic, unusual times. And it's very easy for me to begin to just concentrate and think about the disruption, you might say, the bad of it all. And so I thought it was kind of a good thing, if for nothing else for me, to spend some time going through this little New Testament letter that Paul wrote to the Philippian church. Certainly, it is a letter of joy. Paul, being in the Mamertine prison in Rome, writes a letter to the believers in Philippi. And it's just an amazing thing to see that certainly Paul, you might say, the circumstances of his life, he's able to sort of put on the back burner and maybe push forward the cause of Christ. In other words, he sees in his circumstances, in the things that he's going through, he sees the hand of God in his life, being active in his life. I want us to be able to see God's hand in this. How and what is God doing, first of all, in my heart? Is he encouraging me, strengthening my faith? Because of the place that I'm in, am I drawing close to him as he draws close to me? What about my prayer life? Has it changed in any way? How about my time of just being with him, maybe spending time in the scriptures, in the Bible? God's at work. God is real. Can I see God's hand at work? Maybe he's done something in my heart. Maybe he's done something in a relationship. It's interesting that in times of crisis, many times that's a prime time that maybe a relationship can be improved, or maybe there can be healing. Boy, if that's occurred in your life, we'd love to hear about it. We would love to hear about what God is doing in your life during this time of crisis, this time of change. Well, Paul, being in that prison, writes this letter to the Philippian church, the believers in Philippi, and we could say that Paul has that capacity because of his intimacy with Jesus. He sees God's hand. He sees there's a purpose in why he's in prison. He sees that God is in control, and God is using him where he is. And really, that's an important thing in my heart as we go through this, that God would use us maybe in ways that he normally wouldn't use us. I believe that we can actually reach more people than maybe normally on a Sunday morning by doing what we're doing. And I think that even some of the calls I've gotten in the last few days will bear that out. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about where God is taking us, what God is doing in your life and in my life, in the life of the church, in the life of our country. Could he be bringing a healing of sorts to our country? Could he be bringing an awareness that, boy, I am not in control of all this? Where that I was so busy with life, I didn't have any time for God. Now, because we're fighting an unseen enemy, I really don't have power over this enemy. Could it be turning hearts and minds back to God? Well, as horrible as this sickness, this virus is. If it's accomplishing that, it's a wonderful thing. And so let's see what God does. And Paul, as he writes to the believers in Philippi, just to summarize where we've been, Paul has a heart, a concern, a love, a compassion for others. And he wants to help others. He wants to encourage others. He wants to disciple others. He wants to see that other person's life improve. And so that Paul, you might say, he begins and he says, I have you in my mind. I could be, because of the circumstance I'm in, I could be just thinking about myself. I could be consumed with everything that's going on in my life. Paul steps outside of that and says, I'm really thinking about you. I'm concerned about you. I'm remembering you. And I'm thanking God for you. And as I pray for you, I'm joyful. And it's a joy to do these things. Paul, being in the dungeon in that prison, is filled with joy. Why? Because he's experiencing and he's in the presence of the Lord in that dungeon. And so I have you in mind. He says, I remember you. I'm thankful for you. He desires to be in fellowship with them. And physically, he can't right now. But you know what? This is what we talked about even the last couple times we've been together. We can essentially kind of be in fellowship, even not face-to-face on a computer, but we can be in fellowship in the Spirit. We can be praying for one another and remembering, again, one another in prayer. And so Paul desires to be in fellowship with them. He's concerned for them. He says that he has them in his heart. And you know what? I have many things in my heart. I was thinking as I had read that I can have hunting in my heart. I can have music in my heart. I can have work in my heart. I can have, quote, ministry in my heart. I can have all kinds of things in my heart. And there's nothing wrong with some of those things. But I want Jesus in my heart more than anything. And I think if Jesus is in my heart more than anything, then I'm not going to be so much concerned about things and entertainments, even hobbies and relaxations and those kind of things. I'm going to have a heart and I'm going to be concerned about people. I think that if I'm truly in love with Jesus, I'm going to have a love for people. I always said that it's a supernatural, natural result of just being deeply in love with Jesus. And so Paul has them in his heart. There are a lot of things that can be in here, but I want Jesus in there. And as a result of Jesus being intimately in there, then I have a heart for others. And we said that Jesus, his lifestyle was demonstrated by being others centered. Not even Philippians. Go back to Luke chapter 14. I've always loved this story about Jesus. It shows you his heart. It shows you where Jesus was and what his desires were. Peter says that we're not going to go through, we actually Sunday mornings are going through a study in Peter. And in Peter, we find the heart of God. Peter says that God wishes that none would perish. That's God's heart. And so Jesus, as he began his earthly ministry through the area of Galilee and so on, we read that multitudes of people followed him. And as multitudes of people followed him, then we see these words that he looked upon them. Then he had compassion on them. And as he looked upon them and had compassion on them, then he ministered to them, right? He began to meet then needs corporately, like feeding, I don't know how many thousands of people with fish and loaves of bread. but then personally. And another capacity that Jesus had, just didn't go to the wealthy or the popular. He touched the leper, didn't he? He went to the untouchables, the outcasts. That was his heart. I want that to be my heart. Paul's heart was one that they were in his heart. Okay, so this story, I think we'll go there today. I guess the Lord led us here. Luke chapter 14. Now it happened as Jesus, went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath, that they watched him closely. We don't have the total background to this. Notice Jesus went into the house of one of the rulers. We don't know whether this ruler was friendly, or most of the Pharisees were kind of enemies of Jesus, right? Well, Jesus wasn't afraid to go into their house. If he was friendly, maybe he was an enemy. Somehow Jesus was invited into this house. Interestingly enough, he was invited there to have dinner, let's say, to eat bread. But there's some other circumstances that we can pull out of here. He was invited into the ruler of the Pharisees' house to eat bread, but it was on a Sabbath. That's going to come into play. And why would Luke say at the end of that first verse, and they, in other words, everyone there, and they watched him closely? Well, why were they going to watch him closely? Let's see. Maybe we can pull that reason they were watching him closely out of this. And it reveals to us the heart of the one who loves us so much. And behold, there was a certain man before him who had dropsy. And Jesus answering spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? But they kept silent. And he took him and healed him and let him go. Do you get the scene now? Jesus is invited into this home. You might say it could have been an enemy's home to eat. But why would the ruler of the Pharisees not only invite Jesus, why would he invite an unclean man? Why would he invite someone that to the Jews you better stay away from? It was a setup. It was a setup. They knew it was on the Sabbath, right? So they watched him closely. What is Jesus going to do? They knew what he was going to do. I hope people would know what I would do. If you see someone in need, hopefully I have a heart and a compassion and a concern that I want to try and meet the need, right? If I see someone that is sick, I want to pray for them. We see all around us today people that are in turmoil, people that aren't maybe handling this time well. Peter remembered them. He was thankful for them. He was praying for them. He had them in his heart. In other words, their life touched his life, Paul's life. Paul's life was being touched by these other people, even though Paul was in a horrible place in the dungeon. Today, do we have the heart of Jesus? Do I have the heart of Jesus? As I'm here, kind of in an isolated place, do I feel for our president the pressure and the stress that he must be under? Am I praying for him? How about those workers that are fearful? They're going into work today. They're ministering and helping, doctoring and nursing people that are sick with an unseen virus that's very deadly. They're fearful. They're scared. Am I praying for them? How about those that are just anxious and worried and uncertain? Are we praying for them? See, Paul, even today, we can have the heart of Paul we can have the heart of Jesus. That I'm not just concerned how this is affecting me financially, emotionally, so on and so forth. Am I concerned? Lord, today, let's pray. Give all of us a heart that we see beyond our circumstances, beyond ourselves, that we would have a heart and a desire to touch another. Lord, help us to do that. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Allow Jesus to continually transform your heart and your life during this very intense time. He loves you. He's watching over you. He cares for you. And so do I. God bless you today.